Hello, this video is about the erythrocyte life cycle and recycling. Now, as you know, red blood cells lack a nucleus, and the nucleus is where recipes for proteins are stored. So by getting rid of the nucleus, the red blood cell no longer has recipes to make protein and therefore cannot make proteins. Now, there are two proteins that are particularly important in terms of determining the life cycle of the red blood cell. And those are spectrin and actin. These are two membranes that exist on the inner surface of the cell membrane and help to make the cell membrane fluid, similar to the way cholesterol works. And the reason this is important is because some of the capillaries that the red blood cell has to pass through are so narrow that the red blood cells have to squeeze and bend and fold. Now, because these two proteins can't be replaced, at some point they get worn out and the membrane is no longer flexible. And when the red blood cell passes through those narrow capillaries, which are normally found in the spleen and in the liver, suddenly the red blood cell will burst. And that's the end of that red blood cell. This usually takes about 120 days. Now, what happens when that red blood cell bursts? Let me describe what's on the board to you first. So these two red lines represent a blood vessel that's carrying blood to the liver, the gallbladder. Down here is the small intestine, and over here is the kidney, which I'm not sure if you can see. All right. So we're in the bloodstream now where that red blood cell has just burst and released all of the cell components and the hemoglobin. And what happens is that macrophages come and they ingest, using phagocytosis, they ingest the red blood cells that have burst. So here you see the red blood cell, which hasn't burst in my picture, but in reality has. And the first thing that the macrophage does is it breaks it down into the cell components and hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is about 33% of the cell volume. So there's a whole lot of this protein there. The hemoglobin then gets further broken down into the globin, which is the protein part, and the heme, which is the pigment part that gives the hemoglobin its red color. Now, the globin and the other cellular components are simply recycled by the macrophage. Brings them to lysosomes, lysosomes break them down, the amino acids and fatty acids, all the monomers that were part of those cell components are now available to be reused and recycled by either this cell or other cells in the body. Now let's look at the heme group and see what happens there. Heme is then broken down by the macrophage into biliverdin and iron, which is represented as Fe, ferrin. So by removing the iron can then be released by the macrophage, go back to the liver where it can be stored and reused by the body. The biliverdin is the heme with the iron taken away, and as soon as the iron's taken away, it gives this a green color, a dark green color. The macrophage then converts that into something called bilirubin, which sounds like it should be red in color because of the rube part, but it's actually a light green, a yellow green. Now this bilirubin is sent out of the macrophage into the bloodstream, into the plasma, where it binds with albumin. It has to ride on albumin because it's not soluble in the water part of the plasma. So this bilirubin albumin complex travels through the bloodstream, goes to the liver, and the liver pulls off the albumin and now has just the plain bilirubin. The bilirubin, the liver then sends that into the gallbladder, and the gallbladder sends it to the small intestine as part of bile. Both of these, the biliverdin and the bilirubin, are known as bile pigments, and they are the ones that give bile its green color. So this bile, which includes the bilirubin, enters the small intestine, and bacteria in the small intestine convert bilirubin to something called urobilinogen. And this has a brown pigment and is in fact responsible for why your poop is brown. So I know you've always wondered about that. If we go back to the liver here, once it's pulled off the albumin, it can also release some of the bilirubin in a slightly different form into the bloodstream, where it is converted to a yellow pigment called urochrome. And the kidney filters that urochrome out of the plasma and puts it in the urine to be eliminated, and that is why your urine is yellow. So your red blood cells are responsible for almost all of your color. They give you the pink cheeks and the flush to your skin. They themselves are red, and when they break down, they make your poop brown and your pee yellow.